Morgen and happy Wotan's Day to you. I hope this week is going along swimmingly for you and that all of those things that you would hope for were coming true because that's so important. Dream acquisition. Today I want to get and talk about the wisdom of Wotan and Odin and how that process is in our everyday life. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, talk so much for joining us. Please feel free to like, follow, subscribe us on any of these platforms, including newrealitytv.com. There you will find a plethora of different perspectives that can offer you a path forward, certainly to help us to obtain or maintain our mental space. So be sure, check them out, newrealitytv.com. I also want to say, for those of you who have a few extra coins in your coin purse and you feel like offloading it because the change, who carries change now? Anyway, you're welcome to drop it in our tip jar. Every little bit goes to helping us to spread the word around the world to those who may need it. So please feel free, donate as much as you can. Finally, for those of you who are looking for someone who isn't really in a box somewhere, who you need to bend an ear and just someone to listen to and maybe give some ideas as to how to move forward in your life, feel free to hit up my website, norsewhispers.com and norsewhispers.com/coaching. There you can find out information about me and my mission and all about the shows and certainly about getting some time to where we can just have a conversation. Hopefully find you some information that will benefit you. All right? So today we're talking about the power of Wotan, and we're talking about the gifts that Wotan gained. But more importantly, we're talking about his mission. His mission, of course, in life was to obtain wisdom. He wanted to be a very benevolent king, a very knowledgeable king of the 9 realms. As such, he would travel throughout the lands and he would have these life's experiences where ultimately he would wind up at one of the roots of Yggdrasil that actually goes into a well called the Well of Erd. The Well of Erd was guarded by the 3 Norse sisters. Now, the Norse sisters, for those of you not knowledgeable, they represent, in a rough kind of fashion, the fates of Greek legends. And we have the past, the present, the future. Erd, of course, the oldest sister, represents the past, and she was a wealth of knowledge because she had lots of experiences. We'll talk more about that in a minute. We have Skald, of course, Skald being the middle sister, or the present. She would evaluate your tapestry upon your death. As you ascended into the spiritual realm, she would then evaluate your tapestry sewn, of course, by the baby of the 3, or the future, is Verdandi. And Verdandi would sew a tapestry of your lives, but not of just your wall of conquest, so to speak, but more importantly, your emotional responses to the experiences in your life. This is what she would sew. And so Skald would review this tapestry, and then you would be invited to join one of the halls of the gods in Asgard, or to the Vanir, and there you would reside until Ragnarok. Now, Ragnarok, of course, you would then join in the Battle of Ragnarok and fight until the rebirth. So here we are at the rebirth. Many say, oh, could Ragnarok have happened? No. Trust me, this is one of those times in life that you're going to know it. Right? It'll be clear. But what we're talking about today is the experiences or the quest for wisdom. What is wisdom? We've talked about it before and we'll talk about it 100 more times. Wisdom is simply the application of experiences against knowledge. So we may gain some book smarts, we may pick up our books and we can read them, and we become intellectually smart, knowledge stack, good sized knowledge stack. But that knowledge stack is now unique from this one over here. And it's not until we actually put it into practice or we use experience to then connect the two of these knowledge stacks. Hence the wisdom, kind of an over knowledge, an over intellect, oversight, right? So it allows us to connect multiple knowledge stacks together in a meaningful way. All right. So this is what Wotan sought. Now, today, as we talk about Wotan, Wotan and Othin are the same people. They're one and the same. Wotan is the Germanic tribe interpretation of Othin. Othin and the name Othin would come a little later in history as the tribes, particularly my ancestors, the Danes, migrated north across the Elbe River into the Jutland of what is today Denmark. It was at that time that Wotan would just simply become Othin. Now, when Wotan was recognized by the Germanic tribes, he wasn't really the supreme god that he would go on to become in as he moved north to the north. He was more or less one of the many gods represented. Now, granted, he played a very chief role, but nonetheless, he was simply probably equal to the god Tyr, who we recognized yesterday. Wotan, after generations of war, first with the Vanir and then with certainly with others, the frost giants. Of course, he eliminated them. Even his father Bor and brothers Vili and Vi, Othin would share in the conflict with Vili and Vi against Ymir. The Ymir being the giant of the creation story in the Norse. When the brothers slew Ymir, they would take him apart and they would form the realms. Of course, many parts going to these lands we call Midgard. Very important. So, Midgard, of course, being made of his flesh, the waters of his blood, the sky, all of the things. They used all the parts of him to form most of the infrastructure, if you will, around Midgard, including his eyebrows, which would surround Midgard to keep the other giants away from Midgard. So, kind of protecting, if you will, those lands of modern man. So, Wotan had quite a lot going on, but what we also find in the records as Wotan migrated or manipulated, modified, evolved into Othin, he would kind of change from a warrior king, i.e., where he was with his name Wotan. He was very combat orientated, had a very warriors past, very, very associated with war, battle, and victory, particularly victory. But as he migrates and evolves to Othin in the Norse, he would become more of a benevolent king. He would be searching for wisdom. Now, this quest, again, as I mentioned, brought him all the way to the Well of Erd, where he would give up one of his eyes that he may drink from the Well of Erd. Well, what was the Well of Erd? Well, the Well of Erd was one of the wells at which Yggdrasil would drink from. Yggdrasil being, of course, the center tree of all the realms, would drink from this well. And what it does is, as it drinks the water from the well, it mirrors its collections, its intellect and wisdom into the pool. So those who drank from the well, of course, would drink the experiences of all life throughout all the realms. Now, all the realms connected to Yggdrasil in such a way that their experiences, each and every one of us, each of our experiences would push back through the branches, back into the trunk, down the trunk, into the root, and be reflected then in that water that Yggdrasil drank from. So when Orthin would drink from this well, he would drink the experiences of all life in all the realms. This is really critical because it would take a while for all of this experience to kind of organize in such a way in his mind that he could then use it to now go forward, right? The idea that wisdom is formed by experiences absolutely makes sense if you stop and think about it for just a minute. It makes sense because we can read all kinds of stuff, right? All kinds of stuff. And we can read it all. But it's not really, we don't really begin to build on that knowledge, that intellect, until we actually experience it. We live through it, right? Many times we will really grow even further, or feel like we do, when we experience this knowledge firsthand. This, regardless what the knowledge is about, when we experience it, we're bringing in more sensory input that supports everything that we've learned. This then connects it at a higher level, and we can even grow higher and higher and higher. This is what you're doing every day. Okay, this is what psychology is all about. This is what they spend their whole day thinking about. Is they think about your experiences and how it's affected your intellect. Many times, some of us will have very traumatic experiences and maybe even painful experiences, right? And we will endure and we'll learn, right? And we'll learn and we'll learn. And one of the things that we're going to learn, one of the lessons that we're going to have with this is trust, right? We're going to learn to trust people. We're going to trust people based on the experiences with them, right? So if your new friend turns kind of sideways a little bit and starts doing some sketchy stuff, we may go, wait a minute, it's no, yeah, we're gonna walk away from that. Or they may do something that you're like, yeah, that was fantastic. And it's usually the little things, right? One of the things I've always taught my son is if we see an opportunity to help another person, make it happen. You are the change, right? And so they've experienced it when they're out with me and I see someone who's struggling. I I offer to help. I step right in there and I offer to help. From opening doors to picking things up, whatever it is, I will offer to help. Why? Because an act of kindness goes tenfold times where it would otherwise. But more importantly, I'm teaching my son through these experiences how to have this spirit, this kindle, this love, right? So, super important then. That's the experiences that we're applying now to this wisdom, to this knowledge. Because I know kindness is a great thing, but it's not until I experience kindness do I begin to grow on that. And obviously, what do I get out of it? I get the helping heart that I help someone make their day just a little bit better. Okay? So these are all part and parcels of this thing that we're going to go through in this lifetime called experiences. Now, experiences aren't just sight. They're not just hearing, they're not just smells, they're not just tastes, they're not just touches. They're all of those. And the more of those things that we can wrap into each experience, the more people like using the phrase, and I love the phrase, by the way, and that is living in the moment. The moment includes all of these sensory inputs. So we're taking as many as we can at the same time. Now, mind you, when we talk about meditation, we're talking usually about the other end of the spectrum. So we're trying to eliminate all of the sensory input and focus purely on what's inside. But during the experiences, the more that we can experience, i.e., bring in through my physical sensory input, the more I've got the ability to grow even more wisdom. Wisdom upon wisdom upon wisdom. So, when you think about your experiences in your life, whether they be good, bad, indifferent, whatever, think about not only what you saw during this experience, but what you heard, smelled, tasted, or maybe even touched. What were all of the sensory inputs doing during that experience, during that moment, during that event? Yes, my friend. So, think about the experience. Now, the experiences that we will gain throughout our lives will then continue to build and continue to build our wisdom, tampering down those immediate rages. Now, also, we talked about yesterday and the day before, we've always spoken about this bandwidth through the mind, right? One of the things that the building of wisdom is going to give us is this head space. Remember, I said when trauma comes in, outside of the silt, the trauma is going to take up the rest of the brain, right? Well, the good news is that as we build wisdom, we're building wisdom up higher. We're growing our headspace beyond, right? So not only do we have this little bit here, but now we're going to grow that even more. Now, huge trauma comes in. We're taking on the trauma. We still have the silt. Remember, the silt is those small stressors that are in our lives that we've done purposefully or not, but they're there nonetheless. And they're taking up some of that low end bandwidth, pushing the trauma higher and higher, right? And of course, when trauma gets too much and it's overrun, this space kind of falls out into the brain. We wind up with what many would refer to as an anxiety attack or a panic attack or some form of physiological symptoms. Some people may have a stroke or heart attack So stress can really do that. Why? Because this energy has now exceeded our bandwidth and it's dumping in raw into our physical brain. We need to get it back in the pipe. Right? So, this is the idea of maintaining this headspace at all times, because what headspace does is it gives us the opportunity to chunk down, to break up this huge trauma into manageable pieces, so we manage one part at a time, and it always fits in the bandwidth, right? That's really the idea of having this headspace, is the headspace allows us to break it down and deal with it. All right, so wisdom is a very integral part of expanding our bandwidth to now be able to maintain headspace through trauma. All right, I know that was a lot at you first thing this morning, but it's very important when we talk about mental health. Mental health is maintaining this bandwidth. Whether it be managing this lower part, these what I call the silt, or the stresses, the everyday stresses, whether it be managing the trauma or managing the headspace. Okay, so those are all very integral part of interpreting that physical sensory input that your brain is bringing in. Right now, remember, as our physical sensory input inputs things into our brain, it's got to go through this emotional filter. Okay, so it's going to go through that, and then depending on what the emotional filter says, of course, the signal is given to the heart. The heart then releases hormones into the bloodstream, and the brain, the rest of the brain, then goes, this is how I feel. I feel this way because this chemistry is setting, my brain is doing its little look up there and saying, oh, if I have this list of chemistry, then I feel this way, right? So that's kind of how that all works. Now, what we can see and what we typically see when an individual has just overloaded themselves with a stressful situation or a very traumatic situation, whether real or perceived, is irrelevant to the brain. Remember, imagination is simply another experience. Okay, so as far as the brain's concerned, if you imagine something, it can be just as potent as if you would have experienced it yourself. Okay, because the brain thinks you are. Okay, so if you imagine yourself in a really bad place, your brain then releases the hormones that makes you feel like you're in a really bad place, even though you may not be. Right? So imagination can play quite a role in our mental health. Now, conversely, if we imagine ourselves in a really good place, we're ready to go, we're excited, we're happy, we're thrilled to be in living. As we imagine that, our brain does the same thing. It just releases the hormones that says, yeah, hey man, everything's great, let's do this, right? And we can do that. So that's the power of imagination. Imagination is simply the physical brain's way of virtual experience, I guess is the best way to put it. So our virtual experience then creates the same effect as had we experienced it physically. All of this comes down to managing this bandwidth. And that's really what Olafin sought. That's really what all the great thinkers of history have all sought, is to build this bandwidth, how to handle the management of traumatic events. Real or perceived makes no difference. So, by removing the silt, by getting rid of those stressors, living authentically, living within our authenticity, right? Based on our values, living what I've been taught as the line of congruence, which is where our heart and our mind, oops, backwards there, connect. And they're just, we think the same way we feel, right? And so we all of our thoughts and all of our actions and all of our behaviors are all based on what we think, we feel. That's living congruently. When we live congruently, we're going to reduce these stresses, right? We're going to get rid of them. Get them out of the brain. We're going to get rid of that silt along the bottom of the tube. Now we've got this whole tube at which to operate from. Now, your brain naturally will try to fill the tube, and it, by its very nature, will attempt to leave this head space, right? Why? Because it knows, hey, I need some management in this. I need to understand what I'm doing with it. So it's going to leave that little space unless the trauma is big enough. If the trauma is big enough, it can just overrun the whole tube. And this is where we get into what I call the spillage, which is when this traumatic event, this emotional energy, is outside the tube into the regular physical brain, thereby causing some kind of physiological issue. Headaches, migraines, could cause, like I said, stress or stroke, heart attack, angina. All of these things are caused when this energy exceeds the tube, exceeds this bandwidth, right? You could get sweaty, you can get shaky, you can get the tremors, there's all kinds of physiological symptoms of stress overload. Most people will experience it in such a way as an anxiety attack or a panic attack, whatever, maybe even just general anxiety. Why? Because again, this brain part is overloaded. And so what we have to do, clear the decks, get that silt out of there, figure out how we can get our trauma back into its part of the pipe so that we can get the headspace. Or, again, as we get wisdom, this pipe or this part for the cognitive space here, this headspace, is going to begin to grow. So we're going to have even more. This is why very often we find that, notice how grandparents, they're a little bit more chill when it comes to processing trauma, right? They're just a little easier and a little bit, a little softer. Why? Because they have a larger headspace, and so they can handle a larger trauma. Most of them, many of them, myself included, maybe, have cleared the decks. We've got that silt out of there, so we're living authentically. Why? Because we've got nothing left to prove, right? Grandparents they're really cool. Why? Because who are they trying to impress? No one. They're just trying to live authentically, happily, and joyfully. They're trying to get that harmony. All right? All right, so today's adventures, Wotan, I want you to think about what you process when we're looking at the world around us. What are we experiencing? What are we bringing into our everyday life? And how are we handling it? Let's start thinking about the acquisition of wisdom, of experiences, whether they be second or first hand. These experiences are going to allow us to expand our wisdom, grow this headspace, clear the decks. Remember, we're going to clear the silt. That's the first step. And then we can start chunking down trauma. We can start breaking it down to more manageable pieces where we can actually find joy, happiness, and peace. All right? So today, in your everyday, I want you to seek those things that bring you joy and bring you happiness. Remember, we're experiencing the moments. Bring it in. Hear it, smell it, taste it, right? Absorb those sensory inputs. Remember to manage our space. Remember to ditch away those living inauthentically, and just really expand your pipe so that you've got lots of room should you experience any trauma, real or imagined. All right? Tonight, We will see you tonight at 6:30 Alaska time for Spork Small. This week, I'm sure we have a wonderful question that needs to be answered. So be sure to join. And remember, if you haven't done it before, if you visit my website, NorseWhispers.com, there you can find a way that you can submit your question. And should I make a show out of your question, I'll send you a free T-shirt that you can keep. And it's a win-win for all of us, right? Because for every question that asked, there are 10 people who are too afraid to ask the question, right? So don't hesitate. Also remember is the chat, and it's always open on Facebook. You can pose your question there, and we'll make sure that you get an answer either online or off, and we all gain the wisdom that we're seeking. All right? Have a wonderful Woodlands